A massive international sex trafficking ring is busted.
Girl suspects face a long list of charges, including promoting prostitution, unlawful imprisonment, and criminal content.
Also, child endangerment.
My administration is 100% committed to eradicating human trafficking from the earth.
4:30 a.m. A school in Minnesota is discovered hiding a criminal basement. A principal known for strict ethics betrays the trust of parents. 45 students are quietly pulled into a prostitution ring the moment they turn 18. 2. 1 tons of heroin and fentanyl move silently across the United States. This is not rumor. This is what investigators uncovered. If you want to understand what they tried to hide, stay with this story. For nearly 2 weeks, the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, lived under constant tension after a shooting involving a federal agent and a local woman. Protests spread rapidly from the city center into surrounding neighborhoods. What began as daytime demonstrations escalated within days into prolonged unrest. Sirens became routine. Security barricades appeared overnight. Riot police were stationed across major intersections. According to confirmations from local authorities, the disruption quickly spilled into daily life. Public systems began to fracture. More than 40 public schools altered schedules or shut down temporarily. Several bus routes were suspended. Student attendance collapsed, with some districts reporting absentee rates exceeding 30% in a single day. Parents were advised to keep children indoors after dark. In that environment, safety replaced education as the city's primary concern. Inside that vacuum, something far more serious quietly unfolded. As unrest intensified, Sejong Academy, a public charter school in St. Paul, shifted to online learning. Almost simultaneously, more than $7.2 million in taxpayer funds allocated to the school passed through operational accounts and vanished. Within minutes, the money was routed into opaque financial channels later linked to accounts previously flagged in long-running investigations into prostitution and human trafficking. For federal analysts, the timing could not be ignored. School closures, street chaos, oversight breakdowns. What the public saw as instability, investigators began to recognize as concealment. Early indicators pointed to the possible existence of a large underground prostitution and trafficking network valued at nearly $2 billion, using civil unrest to erase financial trails and operate without scrutiny. As chants echoed through the city and classrooms fell silent, a troubling question surfaced inside federal briefings. Was the unrest truly the cause of the crisis, or was it a distraction designed to hide something far more dangerous, something tied directly to students? While public attention remained fixed on the streets, one figure remained untouched by suspicion. Dr. Ayan Muhammad Ali, a 45-year-old Somali-born principal, had led Sejong Academy for nearly 8 years. To parents and city leaders, she represented discipline, order, and moral structure. She enforced strict codes of conduct. She spoke publicly about traditional values. She was widely credited with maintaining control during a period of growing instability. In a city under strain, she was viewed as a stabilizing force. That image was not accidental. Federal investigators later determined that the unrest did not hinder her operation. It enabled it. As police resources were stretched thin and attention stayed focused on street violence, the principal quietly activated a network cultivated over nearly a decade. After the public funds disappeared, cybersecurity teams began tracing the transfers backward. What they found was not a single breach, but a coordinated system. The operation centered around a restricted access website hosted outside the United States and invisible to standard search engines. Internally labeled qualified students, the platform resembled a private support service, complete with profiles, encrypted messaging, and payment records. Investigators determined it functioned as both recruitment and control. Access was limited to 45 legal adults, all over the age of 18, selected not for talent or achievement but for vulnerability. Payments ranging from $7,000 to $10,000 were classified as support stipends. Each profile followed nearly identical physical criteria: tall, thin, light-skinned, brown hair. The money was only the bait. Financial records revealed parallel accounts tied directly to narcotics transportation inside the United States. Analysts traced 1 tons of heroin and fentanyl connected to the same cash flow, generating an estimated black market value exceeding $400 million annually. The drug profits sustained the website, the accounts, and the silence. Then investigators uncovered what changed the case entirely. Behind the school, concealed by a corridor long labeled as storage, underground scans revealed a deliberately constructed basement. It was not old. It was not accidental. It had been built within the last 4 to 6 years. Soundproofed, independently ventilated, reinforced doors, windowless rooms. This was where students were confined. This was where narcotics were stored. This was the operational core of the network. The conclusion was unavoidable. The riots were not coincidence. They were cover, used by someone who understood how chaos could be weaponized as camouflage. And by the time the city realized what lay beneath the school, enforcement mechanisms were already in motion. As analysts completed the final connections between data points, delay was no longer an option. Every hour increased the risk that students would vanish into trafficking routes and never return. At 4:30 a.m., while most of the city slept under curfew, a convoy of more than 30 unmarked black SUVs moved toward Sejong Academy along deliberately darkened streets. Inside were 280 tactical agents from federal enforcement units, supported by cyber, financial, and medical teams who had rehearsed the operation for weeks. No sirens. No flashing lights. Speed was everything. By 4:40 a.m., perimeter teams sealed surrounding blocks in under 90 seconds. Aerial units confirmed no visible movement inside the building. When the first breaching charge was placed on the rear service entrance, the silence ended. The door gave way. Armed guards inside opened fire almost immediately. The firefight was brief, violent, and contained. Flashbangs detonated. Commands echoed through hallways that once displayed student artwork and attendance notices. Within 90 seconds, resistance on the upper floors collapsed. 7 suspects were wounded. None escaped. The real danger lay below. At 4:47 a.m., investigators located a false wall behind a maintenance corridor. Thermal imaging revealed clustered heat signatures deep within, too many, too close together. The wall was breached. What lay behind it confirmed every fear. A purpose-built basement stretched beneath the school grounds. Segmented. Soundproofed. Independently powered. Ventilation systems hummed overhead. Electrical lines ran cleanly along reinforced ceilings. The space was designed to disappear. Inside the first secured room, agents found 45 students, unconscious, bound, with identification numbers written directly on their skin. Toxicology tests later confirmed the presence of fast-acting sedatives. Ages ranged from 17 to 18. No one could respond. Time had become the enemy. Medical teams moved immediately. Oxygen levels inside the enclosed space measured far below safe thresholds. Later reports confirmed multiple suppressive substances at concentrations that could have become fatal within hours. The youngest victims had only just crossed into adulthood. No one had been told where they were being taken or why they were being moved. As search teams pushed deeper into the underground structure, a secondary discovery confirmed the true scale of the operation. Behind a reinforced false firewall, agents uncovered more than 1 ton of narcotics. Heroin and fentanyl were packed in industrial-grade wrapping, labeled for rapid distribution and staged for immediate movement. Conservative estimates placed the annual black market value in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Nearby, vacuum-sealed cash was stacked in standardized blocks. Initial counts exceeded $80 million before dawn. At 5:02 a.m., escape attempts began. Dr. Ayan Muhammad Ali was apprehended while attempting to move through a secondary basement corridor designed for quiet transit. She offered no statement. She did not resist. Around her, 16 associates were taken into custody, ordered to the ground, and restrained without incident. The structure she had spent years constructing collapsed in minutes. As daylight approached, 45 young lives were pulled back from the edge of disappearance. Hundreds of millions of dollars in assets were frozen. More than a ton of narcotics was seized before reaching consumers. The building fell silent again, but the silence was no longer concealment. It marked an ending. For the agents on scene, there was no celebration. Only a brief pause, long enough to absorb how close the operation had come to becoming irreversible, and how easily the city's distraction could have allowed everything beneath that school to vanish permanently. When the final detainee was secured and medical teams began stabilizing the 45 students, the operation did not slow. It expanded. Federal protocol dictated that a breach of this magnitude could never be treated as a single-site failure. By 5:22 a.m., parallel teams were already activating secondary warrants tied to data extracted from basement servers. What had been stopped underground was only the visible endpoint of a much longer chain. Inside a hardened equipment room, technicians located 9 encrypted storage devices concealed behind false conduit panels. Each device was built with layered redundancies designed to wipe data if removed improperly. Time was critical. Within 12 minutes, forensic specialists isolated the power feeds and cloned the contents. What emerged was not disorder, but precision. Logs, schedules, identifiers, all maintained with professional discipline. Transaction maps revealed more than 1,400 communications over a 12-month period, routed through offshore relays and domestic proxy servers. No personal names were used. Instead, the system relied on numeric identifiers matching the markings found on the student's skin. Every movement carried a timestamp. Every transfer required confirmation. Every handoff left a record. Analysts noted that the cadence never broke, even during nights of citywide unrest. The system had been engineered to function while everyone else was distracted. As dawn approached, a second wave of activity surfaced, not inside the school, but beyond it. At 5:41 a.m., surveillance units detected 2 vehicles accelerating away from a secondary logistics node less than 3 miles from campus. The vehicles ignored roadblocks and attempted evasive maneuvers. A brief pursuit followed. Tactical units boxed them in within 90 seconds. No shots were fired. Inside the vehicles, agents recovered $8 million in bundled cash, multiple burner phones, and routing documents pointing to out-of-state destinations scheduled within hours. The discovery forced an immediate recalculation. Conservative estimates placed the network's monthly throughput between $70 and $90 million, combining narcotics distribution and trafficking services. Over a single year, that figure approached $1 billion. The numbers explained the infrastructure. They explained the patience. They explained why nothing had been left to chance. By 6:10 a.m., Command authorized a citywide data freeze tied to all associated accounts and shell entities. Within the first hour, 37 financial channels went dark. By midday, the number exceeded 120. What had once appeared as independent streams collapsed into a single diagram, clean, deliberate, and deeply embedded. Yet the most sobering discovery was not financial. It was temporal. System logs showed the next scheduled transfer was set for 8 a.m., less than 3 hours after the breach. Had the operation begun even slightly later, the basement would have been empty. The students would have been gone. The narcotics would have moved. The trail would have ended at sealed doors and plausible deniability. For agents on the ground, the realization landed quietly. Battles are often measured in seconds. This one was measured in minutes that almost passed unnoticed. The unrest outside had bought the system time. The early breach took it back. As the sun rose, Sejong Academy looked unchanged from the street. Classrooms remained dark. Hallways stayed silent. To anyone passing by, it appeared exactly as it always had, a closed school waiting for stability to return. Inside the evidence trucks, the picture was unmistakable. What had been dismantled was not a single crime scene. It was a machine that thrived on routine trust and the assumption that no one would ever look twice. The fighting was over. The conflict had shifted into records, timelines, and an uncomfortable reckoning over how much had been allowed to happen before intervention came. As evidence from Sejong Academy was cataloged and sealed, investigators reached a conclusion that unsettled even veteran teams. The operation could not have survived on secrecy alone. It survived on permission. Not spoken permission. Not written confessions. But the quiet kind, granted through renewals, approvals, and routine authorizations that never required anyone to walk down a stairwell or listen for a locked door. Within 48 hours, federal auditors began cross-referencing regulatory records tied to the school and its auxiliary facilities. What they uncovered followed a pattern repeated with unnerving consistency. Routine inspections had been postponed 9 times over a 7-year period. Each postponement carried a justification: staff shortages, public safety priorities, emergency redeployments. None appeared extraordinary. Together, they created a gap wide enough for anything to pass through. Permit renewals told the same story. Facilities marked as limited access were reauthorized every 12 months without a physical walkthrough. Environmental compliance reports were accepted with identical language copied year after year. In one instance, a safety certification bearing a digital signature was traced back to an official who had retired 18 months earlier. The system did not notice, or did not ask. Financial oversight exposed even more. Analysts identified 62 transactions flagged by automated systems over 4 years for irregular routing or timing. Each alert was resolved within 24 hours, cleared by a supervisor with a brief notation. No further action required. No interviews. No site visits. The amounts were small enough to appear harmless. $12,000, $27,500, $49,900. Always below escalation thresholds. Over time, those fragments added up to more than $11 million that moved without resistance. None of the names tied to those approvals appeared in arrest reports. None carried weapons. None were present during the raid. Yet their influence was undeniable. A compliance officer approved 31 restricted access entries without requesting logs. A contracted auditor certified inventory counts without reconciling discrepancies exceeding 400%. A regional administrator authorized after-hours access codes for maintenance purposes that were renewed 14 consecutive times. Investigators described the structure as a chain built from ordinary links. Each decision, viewed alone, was defensible. Each signature looked routine. But aligned on a single timeline, the effect became undeniable. Every approval coincided with periods of underground expansion. Every lapse matched phases later confirmed by physical evidence. The system had not been broken. It had been used. The most revealing discovery emerged from internal correspondence recovered from mirrored servers tied to multiple agencies. Message after message showed the same pattern. Responsibility was deferred upward, sideways, or outward. Outside scope. Previously reviewed. Addressed last cycle. No one explicitly approved wrongdoing. They simply declined to look closer. By the end of the week, 19 individuals across multiple agencies were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Not for crimes committed in secrecy, but for behaviors normalized in plain sight. The absence of scrutiny had quietly become policy by default. For veteran investigators, many with decades of service, this was the most difficult reality to accept. Criminal organizations can be dismantled with warrants, raids, and arrests. Systems built on habit are far harder to confront. They do not resist. They cooperate. They function smoothly, predictably, and without noise. What the review uncovered was not evidence of conspirators meeting in dark rooms. It was something far more familiar and far more dangerous. A culture that rewarded speed over verification, paperwork over presence, efficiency over curiosity. In that environment, a signature carried more authority than a question, and silence traveled faster than accountability. The basement had been hidden underground. The protection that sustained it operated openly. When news of the arrests reached St. Paul, the reaction was not immediate anger or outrage. It was silence. A heavy, disbelieving pause that settled across neighborhoods that had trusted, say, Jung Academy for years. For many families, especially older residents, the school had symbolized stability in a city that often felt uncertain. It was where grandchildren were dropped off each morning, where rules were firm, where danger was assumed not to exist. Within 24 hours, federal hotlines began receiving calls. By the end of the third day, more than 2,600 reports had been logged. Parents, relatives, neighbors, all asking the same restrained question in different ways. Did you find everyone? Some callers referenced names. Others cited dates. Many simply described changes. A student who became withdrawn. Someone who stopped answering messages. Unexplained payments that had once seemed like scholarships or stipends. Community centers filled quietly. There were no protests. No chants. Just rows of folding chairs occupied by people over 60, holding enrollment documents, attendance notices, and screenshots of routine school emails that now felt unsettling. One grandfather brought a printed message dated 2 years earlier confirming after-hours academic support. He had framed it as proof of diligence. Sitting under fluorescent lights, he wondered what that phrase had actually meant. Local officials attempted reassurance, but numbers undercut their words. Review teams identified at least 112 families directly connected to the 45 rescued students through guardianship arrangements, extended care roles, or financial sponsorship. Many had never spoken with law enforcement before. Others had interacted with the school weekly. Trust had not been passive. It had been active. For older residents, the shock cut deeper. Many had grown up in an era when schools were sanctuaries and administrators were unquestioned authorities. Surveys conducted by county outreach teams showed that nearly 78% of residents over 60 believed the school was among the safest places in the district prior to the arrests. That belief did not fade slowly. It collapsed. The emotional toll surfaced in small, measurable ways. Attendance at neighborhood meetings doubled, then tripled. Counseling services reported a 340% increase in requests from caregivers over 55 within 2 weeks. These were not parents of young children. They were grandparents, aunts, uncles, relatives who had stepped in quietly to support family members, trusting that institutions would protect them. Investigators documented another troubling pattern. Several families admitted noticing irregularities years earlier. Restricted access days. Sudden policy shifts. Scheduled changes without explanation. They had dismissed them, not from neglect, but from respect. The school knows best. That assumption, investigators concluded, had been the network's greatest asset. By the end of the month, Sejong Academy's enrollment records were no longer administrative files. They were evidence. Each name carried weight beyond numbers. Each signature represented trust placed and broken. The building itself remained closed. Gates locked. Sign unchanged. To passers-by, it still looked like a school waiting to reopen. To the community, it no longer resembled anything familiar. What settled over the city was not panic. It was something colder. Recognition. The danger had not come from strangers or distant criminals. It had come from a place woven into daily routine, protected by habit and belief. Older residents understood this instinctively. Many had lived long enough to see institutions fail before, but rarely so close to home. The aftermath did not offer comfort. It brought awareness. And with awareness came a question no official statement could answer. How many warnings had been quietly explained away? And how many people paid the price for trusting what felt normal? In the days that followed, investigators realized the most difficult phase of the case was no longer operational. It was cognitive. The arrests were complete. The basement was sealed. The immediate danger had passed. Yet the investigation did not slow, because the evidence raised questions that could not be resolved with warrants or handcuffs. The first question was time. Records indicated that concealed systems linked to Sejong Academy had been active for at least 9 years. Maintenance logs, digital certificates, utility usage patterns, all converged on a start window that predated multiple administrations. More than 3,000 school days had passed while the structure operated undetected. For many residents, especially those over 60, that realization carried weight. This was not a momentary failure. It was duration. The second question was scale. Analysts mapped 218 distinct data intersections. Vendors, contractors, temporary staff, service providers who interacted with the school during that period. Most were legitimate. Some were negligent. A small fraction were willfully blind. None were remarkable alone. Together, they formed a web dense enough to absorb scrutiny without breaking. Investigators summarized it plainly. When responsibility is divided widely enough, accountability becomes optional. Then came the question of warning. Automated systems had generated 74 alerts over 7 years. Irregular access hours. Anomalous power consumption. Duplicate credential tokens. Every alert was acknowledged. Every alert was closed. No escalation followed. In internal reviews, the same explanation appeared repeatedly. Pattern consistent with prior cycles. Familiarity had overridden curiosity. Community testimony added another layer. Outreach teams collected more than 900 statements from residents who recalled minor anomalies they had dismissed. Doors closed unexpectedly. Restricted hallways. Policy changes without explanation. None described fear at the time. They described trust. Investigators noted that trust, once normalized, does not trigger alarms. It quiets them. For older Americans, the implications were especially unsettling. Many had lived through periods when institutions were fewer, closer, and personal accountability felt tangible. Here, the opposite had occurred. Systems had grown layered, efficient, and abstract. Oversight became procedural rather than present. One retired civil engineer summarized it during a county briefing. "We didn't miss the signs. We were trained not to see them." The final question concerned recurrence. Federal assessments identified 27 facilities statewide with structural or administrative similarities requiring immediate review. No accusations were issued. No conclusions drawn. But the number reframed the case. This was not about one school or one administrator. It was about how easily complexity can hide intention. As files multiplied and timelines expanded, investigators acknowledged a difficult truth. Closing a case does not close its consequences. Answers generate more questions. Each explanation reveals another gap. The operation had ended quickly. Understanding it would take years. By the end of the week, the city returned to a quieter rhythm. Streets reopened. Headlines moved on. But among those who had lived long enough to recognize patterns, the unease remained. They understood something fundamental. The most dangerous systems are not the ones that announce themselves. They are the ones that work so smoothly no one thinks to ask how. And once that question takes hold, it does not let go.